County Supervisor Philip Bazzini, James City County Supervisor Mr. Hippel is with us now. Virginia Beach Council Member Stacy Cummings and Robert Remick. So welcome. Yeah. Would you all like to take a few minutes to just to introduce yourself real quick? I'm going to start down here, Mr. Hippel.
Let's get the meeting going. Hi, thank you very much. Bye.
All right. I know Mr. Bazzani's already been around, but how about from Virginia Beach? Yeah. Mr. Cummings?
Well, pleased to be here and pleased to be anywhere. We won our election in November, and so this is our first week of being on the council, and I'm looking forward to serving the city and serving the region. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Remick?
Good afternoon. I'm actually Worth Remick. Robert is my legal first name. I take my name Worth for my middle name. I'm originally from Suffolk for 10 years, Isle of Wight County, Smithfield, Norfolk, and I landed in Virginia Beach in 1985 with a full head of hair, and I'm looking forward to serving this region in this capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gray, how about yourself?
Good, thank you. This is, I think, my third tour of duty here, at the Planning District Commission meetings. First, as a city manager, when I was an assistant city manager, I spent a few meetings here, and then as an alternate when I became a council member. So back as mayor now, glad to be back. I always enjoyed the work that's done here on the regional level. So looking forward to what's ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Clanton from Norfolk, see you? No? Mr. McGee? Not here. Okay, so that moves on. So now what takes us, did I miss anybody?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you.
Paul Kaplan from the city of Franklin, the new mayor, 16 days on the job, but 31 years of service in law enforcement for Southampton County and the city of Franklin. So working with the budget for many years, so I'm familiar with the processes. I look forward to being a part of this group. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Did I miss anybody else? Okay. Takes us now to the approval of the minutes or modifications. Mr. Crum, anything?
I have no modifications of the agenda recommended. Sir, I'd recommend the commission approve the agenda as presented today.
Is there a motion?
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent. Public comments, Mr. Crum?
No comments received in advance of today's meeting. Would anybody in the audience like to address the commission today? Seeing none, Mr. Chairman, back to you, sir.
Okay. It's going to lead us to the executive director's report. So back to you, sir.
So real quickly, my monthly report is enclosed for your review. A couple of quick items. Obviously, we're out of the starting blocks on the Virginia General Assembly session. I will be attending the Hampton Roads Caucus meeting in Richmond next Thursday morning. Just as background information, of course, the caucus meets every Thursday at 7:30 a.m. Next Thursday, I'll be presenting the regional legislative agenda. The regional legislative agenda, I believe some of you have them at your place. Others, there should be some backups out in the hallway. And if you weren't able to access a copy, please see Matt. And we have several boxes that we could be happy to get to you. So we'll be discussing with the Hampton Roads Caucus our regional legislative priorities. A little later in today's meeting, I'm going to talk about some of the bills that we are following that we want to bring to your attention. Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to cede the rest of my time to Emma Corbett. Emma is an important member of our water resources staff, and we thought it would be nice to have Emma give you a brief report, a little bit of background information on some of the work she's doing around our community rating system. So Emma, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Emma Corbett, Resilience Planner here at the PDC, and today I'll just be providing a brief overview on a recent study that we conducted assessing opportunities where we can provide regional CRS support to our communities. So before I dive into the recommendations from this study, I first just want to provide some background information on the Community Rating System, or CRS. This is a voluntary incentive program of the National Flood Insurance Program, and it rewards communities for going above and beyond the minimum floodplain management requirements. So communities will participate in various flood mitigation activities, and this will earn them points, which translate to a class rating that ranges from a 9 to a 1. These class ratings will earn them a discount on flood insurance for their residents of that community. And again, a class 1 community is the highest achievable class rating, and this will earn the greatest discount on flood insurance for residents. Here in Hampton Roads, we have 11 communities that participate in the community rating system, and their class ratings range from a class 9, which earns them a 5% discount on flood insurance, to a class 5, which earns a 25% discount on flood insurance for residents. This can translate to very significant savings for most policyholders. In 2023, Hampton Roads residents collectively saved about $5.8 million on their flood insurance through CRS discounts. So because of all of these benefits of the community rating system, we recently conducted a study with local staff and consultants to identify opportunities where we could provide more credit for our CRS communities through the development of regional resources. So the key recommendations from this study identified 4 major opportunities where we can provide credit, and this included enhancement of existing regional resources such as our elevation certificate database and our regional hazard mitigation plan. We also recommended creating new resources such as a program for public information and a substantial improvements, substantial damage plan. Once these are developed as part of our resilience work plan, they will be provided to CRS communities, and they can use these resources to earn points and increase their CRS class rating, which will translate to greater savings for residents of those communities. In addition to these savings on flood insurance, we'll also gain the overarching benefits of the community rating system, which is enhanced local and regional resilience. So we're very excited about the opportunities identified by this study for us to better support our CRS communities here in Hampton Roads. And we're looking forward to implementing these recommendations going forward. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Does anybody have any questions for her? Graham?
I just want to thank Emma. She's doing a lot of great work, and please use Emma as a resource if you have any follow-up questions on any of this information. Thank you so much, Emma.
Thank you.
If it's okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll move into employee recognition.
Yes,
on
sir,
the
please.
next agenda item. We like to, at our annual meeting, recognize some employees who are celebrating a significant milestone. So first, I'm going to ask Jill Sunderland to stand up, please. So Jill works in your Water Resources Department. Jill's specialty and expertise is around the topic area of stormwater management. Jill is that person that's bringing together all of your local stormwater experts and bringing them together to convene them, to discuss best practices, to discuss what's working. Sometimes to discuss what's not working, right, Jill? and even how we get alignment to take ideas to our state partners on changes that need made. This work is really important. If your local city has an MS4 permit and needs an action plan, Jill is part of that effort to coordinate efforts to make certain you're getting those items thought about and addressed in a proactive manner. In addition to an incredibly full slate of projects and programs and assignments, Jill also volunteered to take on the work to redo our parking lot out front. Okay, so for some of our newer commission members, what is being done out front is it's going to be a regional example of best management practices around stormwater. Infiltrating stormwater, bioretention basin, really some interesting techniques that remove sediment, native plants, electric vehicle charging stations, etc. We'll talk more about that next month because we're going to have a grand opening, and just a preview, right, Jill? We will be parking out there at next month's commission meeting. But I just want to thank Jill. Jill and some of her partners found this money to do that, a $670,000 grant. And it really is going to allow us to build a real life example of how to use best practices in our region. So, Jill, thank you for everything you do. Really much appreciated. Could we all thank Jill? And our second is Andrew Margison. Andrew, step on up, right? So, Andrew, I always say, that some of us get to be at the microphone, right? And there's some people doing things that really make things happen behind the scene. Andrew is one of those people. Andrew is the guy that maintains this building. He is a certified HVAC technician. He does all that work on his own. Much of the carpentry work you've seen done around here, much of the painting, much of the structural fixes, those are things Andrew does himself. So he's saved us money. We don't contract out anymore for that work. It's just been an incredible pleasure to work with Andrew. He is a jack of all trades and just is an enormous asset to us. And keeping this building something that we're very proud of is the regional building. So Andrew Margison, thank you so much.
Andrew.
That's all I have, sir.
Okay, I don't see Mr. Gaduldig. I wish I could say that better.
Petrosky.
Petrosky here. Do we have a report from them at all?
Well, I can just quickly say that your Community Advisory Committee last month met out at Norfolk International Airport. We got a great briefing from Mark Perriman out at the airport on incredible things that are happening, not only with air service, but also with development around the area. You're probably all aware, but just in case, with the abandonment of the crosswind runway at the airport, there are now properties available for reuse in Virginia Beach, as you're all aware, by Burton Station area, and also in Norfolk. And the best way to describe for our Norfolk partners is when you come across the bridge and you're leaving the airport, where the metallic bird is made out of airplane parts on the left, that area behind that and on the other side of the road is now open. And the airport's looking for ideas about how those two spaces might be used. So a really great presentation. We will have Mark in front of this board because a lot of what he's doing eventually is Mark Perriman is really an economic driver for the region. So, but the CAC heard that briefing at their last meeting.
Thank you. Okay, item 7 on the agenda is the election of officers. I believe Ms. Knoll has a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During the November 21st meeting of the HRPDC, Chair Doug Pons requested that the HRPDC nominating committee prepare recommendations of nominees for the officer positions for the upcoming year. The committee recommends the following members be brought forth to continue to serve as officers for the commission for 2025. Chair, Portsmouth Mayor Shannon Glover. Vice Chair, Hampton Mayor Jimmy Gray. Treasurer, Williamsburg City Manager Andrew Trevette. And Secretary, HRPDC Executive Director Bob Crum. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Knoll. Are there any other nominations from the floor? Seeing none, would somebody like to make a motion to?
So move.
Second.
Aye.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So if I may make one recommendation. So Mayor Glover sends his regrets. He is attending a funeral today and is unable to attend today. And Mayor Gray, I know we're working through just one more step in the process, and we'll have you officially appointed. I might. Chair Pons has agreed to chair one more meeting, and then we'll bring in our new chair and vice chair for the February meeting, if that meets everybody's okay. Mayor Gray, thank you for agreeing to be one of our leaders here. Mr. Trivett, thank you so much, and I know Mayor Glover looks forward to working with both of you. So thank you so much. But you knew we couldn't get away with it. Oh, I'll let you do the vote first.
Okay, well, I think I did the vote.
Okay.
I get a fancy gavel too?
You do. So Mayor Pons, we just wanted to give you a little something to remember us. Here's a gavel for Douglas G. Pons, HRPDC Chair, 2023 to 2025. And a little something, as I told Chair McCarty, if he ever gets mad at actions taken in the future, he can use his gavel and hit the logo. So I suppose, I suppose you can do that here at the PDC. But sir, thank you so much.
Well, it has been an honor to serve you all, and you know, really before I got in this position, I didn't understand the impact that this organization has. But as you look around the table and you see all the different faces from all the different communities, one can't help but recognize the collaborative effort that makes this region so special. And so for me to be a part of that as chair has been a great honor. So thank you for that. Unfortunately, you're not done with me yet. I get to carry on, which takes us to the consent agenda.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and commission members, your consent agenda is presented to you in your agenda package. I would recommend that you consider taking action to approve today's consent agenda as presented for you.
Okay, so you will have the consent agenda items in your packet. Are there any questions, comments?
I apologize, I made one error. Our personnel manual, the HRPDC personnel manual, the Personnel and Budget Committee asked us to make a few more revisions to that this morning. So they would like to ask that that be removed from today's consent agenda. My apologies, that's my error. So we would be approving everything from letters A through F, and we would bring back the personnel manual revisions next month.
With that modification of the consent agenda, would somebody like to make a motion to approve?
Motion for approval?
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor? Any opposition? Okay, motion passes. Okay, so last month we did hear from Mr. McFarland, gave a report on the resilient design standards, and we didn't have a quorum, so we're going to ask him to come back up and give us a briefing again, and hopefully we can take action.
Yeah, so as Ben makes his way to the podium, Ben's briefing today represents an awful lot of work. Ben calling together your local professionals, drawing on all the work that's been done here at the PDC over the last several years to really put together what I think you agree is a comprehensive set of design guidelines. So Ben, thanks for all your work, and we're going to have Ben give a high-level briefing on this proposal today. So thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Bob. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Happy to be back up again talking about the design guidelines. We've been working on these for a number of years with your local staff and are really excited to be able to present these to you for your consideration. This represents, as Bob mentioned, a collaboration of a number of people from around the region to come up with some consensus recommendations for how we can move forward to build more resilient communities here in Hampton Roads. I will be a little bit more brief today than I was back in November, but the substance remains the same. So why do we need new standards? Why do we need resilient design guidelines here? Well, the issue is that we have flooding here in Hampton Roads, and it's happening more often than it used to. And it's hitting places where it didn't used to flood before. And those places where we think we're familiar with the risk of flooding, it's getting more and more treacherous for our communities, for residents, for businesses, for public and private sector. And so coming up with new guidelines, new standards for our communities on how do we actually build in a way that protects us not only against our current risk, but also protects us for our future risk is essential to making sure that Hampton Roads remains a resilient region moving forward. The trouble is that our current standards are based on the past. They are based on historic observations that are now out of date, in some cases by many decades worth of data. The old model of looking at the past and then running some statistical analysis on that data and combining that with some sort of risk assessment or risk tolerance to come up with a design standard no longer is valid. We think about knowing the change that we're already seeing, but also thinking about the changes that we think are going to happen or are pretty sure are going to happen moving on into the future. And so we need a new model of how to actually come up with what these design standards should be, built on not only observations, but also future projections, and considering both the risk tolerance that we have for different types of decisions, but also the lifespan of those projects. The timing is going to matter. Something that's going to be around for 20 years doesn't need the same design standard as something that might be around for 100 or 150 years. And so making our communities more resilient really requires us to think about what it means to build for the future and not just for yesterday or even for today. So for these design guidelines, what we have are three kind of components here. One, we have observations. So we look at what we've actually seen in terms of sea level trends over the last almost 100 years worth of data that we have for that information. Historic rainfall patterns as well. We look at projections, climate projections based on the best available science from federal agencies and state agencies as well, academic partners, looking at sea level rise projections and also future rainfall. And then using this information to develop applications for how we might actually incorporate those into public policies at the local level. Tailwater elevations, rainfall design storms, and joint storm pairs. For the tailwater elevations, what these represent for tidally influenced areas, the level of water, the water surface elevation that we have to plan for to make sure that when those pipes get filled with rainwater, that they drain sufficiently. And so what we have done is run a regional analysis that covers all of the HUC 12 watersheds here in Hampton Roads to provide design level or water surface elevations for a number of different return periods that local stormwater engineers can use when they're running their models to make sure that the infrastructure that we're putting in place now is designed for the conditions that it's going to be operating under. For design storms, looking at not just the past rainfall, but thinking about how climate change is affecting the amount of rainfall we're seeing, the intensity of that rainfall that we're seeing. We know we're seeing more rain, but it's also getting more intense. And so taking that into account in the intensity, duration, frequency curves that we use for a variety of decisions when it comes to stormwater management is critical. And what we have done here is looked at the different projections that are out there. There's some work that was funded by the Chesapeake Bay program and by the Commonwealth to develop projections at the city or the county equivalent level and developed multipliers based on the existing Atlas 14 product for each of our communities here in Hampton Roads. So not the same methodology that we used for all of our communities, but a different multiplier depending on what the actual predictions or projections are for that particular community. Rainfall is not going to look the same everywhere moving forward. So it's important to keep in mind that some places are going to experience different impacts from these changes than others. Joint storm pairs, this is I think a very important step for us moving forward, is to really think about how tidal events and rainfall events interact. We know that they don't act on their own, that when we get a hurricane, usually it comes not just with higher storm surge, but also comes with significant rainfall. In other cases, we may get a significant rainfall event, but we need to take into account what the higher tides might be under those situations to make sure that our stormwater infrastructure is operating as intended. And then lastly, we want to be able to take into account that, the fact that different types of decisions require different types of standards that we hold, that we're not using a one-size-fits-all approach to every type of development decision that's out there. And so we provide some guidance on how to incorporate project lifespan into the decision-making process, as well as criticality. Some things are just more important than others. It's important that they be operational under a wider range of circumstances than some projects. And so holding those types of projects to a higher standard is important to making sure that they are operational when we need them to be. So where does this leave us? Well, we know that our climate is changing. We're already seeing evidence of that, every day. And we think that it's going to happen. We're projecting that it's going to happen more frequently and on into the future. That this is not a problem that's going away anytime soon. So we know that we have sea level rise. We know we have increased rainfall. Increases in those things, we're already making observations that these changes are happening. And we know that it's going to get worse. But if we provide better information, we provide these standards to not just to the public sector that's out there, but also to make them available to our private sector counterparts, folks that are making decisions on their own for their own properties, that they will be able to make more informed and better decisions for the individual development decisions that they are making. So it's not just about public infrastructure, but also about the day-to-day projects that people throughout Hampton Roads are working on. We know that higher standards reduce risk. They will be more expensive. Things are more expensive now. We know that the cost of infrastructure is going up for a variety of reasons, but also our risk is going up. So either way, there is a cost. Paying for that cost up front in the form of more resilient infrastructure will reduce their risk over time to residents, to public sector workers, to others throughout Hampton Roads to make sure that our communities are better able to withstand the types of impacts we think we're going to be seeing in the coming decades. And so our recommendations based on this work are for we recommend that the PDC adopt a resolution encouraging our localities to incorporate the design standards or guidelines into their local plans and policies. To reiterate there, as a PDC, we're not in the enforcement business, but we are recommending that you all look to these standards as examples for what you can do on your own individually. And we know that some communities are already considering these types of things, but we want to put this kind of official stamp of approval on it to convey that the region stands behind this kind of work. And so this particular recommendations are for sea level rise scenarios that have been updated, tailwater elevations that incorporate sea level rise, future precipitation levels, and joint tidal rainfall design storms. I think that's it. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Do we have any questions from Mr. McFarland? Mr. Crum, any other questions or comments?
No, just that this is, again, represents several years of work with a lot of your locality staff, partners being very involved, working with Ben and the team. And we believe we're to the point where we would really like to ask for this action, that the HRPDC adopt the enclosed resolution and encourage our local governments to incorporate these resilient design standards into their local plans and policies.
Mr. Hippel?
Ben, is it a blanket? I haven't had a chance to look at it. Is it a blanket across the region, or is it different the closer you get to the coastal areas and the further you get away, that it changes on how we protect and because a lot of times you end up with, a blanket thing that in James City County wouldn't be necessary, but maybe in Norfolk or Virginia Beach, where they're a little bit lower, would be necessary to.
Sure, yes. Thank you for the question. So the sea level rise projections are regional. So that's one set of sea level rise scenarios that we use for the whole region. There's really not a lot of difference between what we see in terms of sea level rise up in Yorktown versus Norfolk or in Virginia Beach or in Portsmouth. For the other ones, they are tailored to individual localities, at least to the rainfall design storms. There's one set of values for each of our member jurisdictions. For the tailwater elevations, those are actually at the watershed level. So that's even smaller than the locality. So it is, we try to be as targeted as we can be, depending on the quality, the availability of the data.
Thank you. And I know it's important with, the work I do. I'll watch it all the time. And you've got your flood zone and you got freeboard and you want to be above that so that you have a safety zone in there. And that's changed, through the years and it's getting higher and higher. But I was just making sure that, that we don't go too far that it pushes it up too much, because every inch is a dollar cost in there for localities and for our citizens as well. So we keep it as tight as possible, but keep in mind that, if it doesn't flood, doesn't have an issue, you're saving money. So there's a balance between the two, and I agree with you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, sir.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Most everybody in the room probably knows that the city of Franklin had a 1,000-year flood in 1999 that devastated our entire downtown area. A 1,000-year flood was followed in 2006 with a 500-year flood. It wasn't nearly as bad, but also caused considerable damage. So we're definitely in favor of doing anything we can to mitigate. To my knowledge, nothing has been done to the Blackwater River. And I know it didn't just flood Franklin. I know the Zuni area of Isle of Wight got hit, as parts of Southampton and I know up into Surrey County as well. So these aren't little floods; these are big floods. So we got to watch for those too.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Yes, sir. Keaton?
Yeah, would VDOT be included in the organizations to consider these standards? Because I know, speaking of Mayor Kaplan's comments, I know the 460 right there by Zuni, the entire 460 flooded during Hurricane Floyd. Is that something that they would consider as well in their design?
Thank you for the question. So VDOT is one of the stakeholders that we've been working with throughout this whole process. The standards that we're recommending here would not necessarily apply to VDOT. I know they are working on their own path forward. They have a resilience plan that the department has adopted. They, in different kind of departments of VDOT, have already adopted some of these higher standards. So the Bridges and Structures Division at VDOT, for example, has already adopted some of this work as well on their own independently. So we have been working with them on this. Where they are with the stormwater, some of the more specific things for your more typical non-structural projects, they are still working through that. But they are involved in our committee, our working group. We talked with them regularly about these issues.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, one more time. And Ben, you may want to mention too that with HRBT, we raised that up as well from where we had originally started, for coastal flooding, and and also to get the concrete above a certain level to make it 100-year instead of a 50-year bridge. And that protects the underlying, a lot of people think of if it floods on the road, the surface of the road, but also on bridges like that. So that's why you've got to lift so much up to get it out of that flood zone to make your bridges last long.
Yeah, no, I think, when we're thinking about the long-term projects that you would apply those highest standards to, the HRBT is kind of the gold standard. We're hoping it's going to be around for a very long time. We're spending a lot of money on it regionally, and so ensuring that it's going to be, resilient for 100 to 150 years is kind of important.
Thank you for your question, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Considering all of this stuff obviously will cost a considerable sum. Just perusing through the legislative agenda and wondering how successful you think we might reasonably be with our ask for state money to go alongside the coastal storm risk management program and ensuring that CFPF dollars are made available on a continuing basis.
So that's something we're going to have front and center in front of our caucus members next week. I can tell you that this is both a South Side and a Peninsula issue. As you all know, the costs of these projects are enormous. And unfortunately, to unlock federal money, many times you need 35% local match of non-federal funds to be able to unlock that federal money. So for all of our jurisdictions, whether it be Norfolk or Virginia Beach, whether it be Hampton, this is a common issue. So I think that we have those statements in our legislative agenda is important. I can tell you that several legislative liaisons are working very hard to try to stress the importance of all of those issues that you mentioned from our legislative agenda, whether it's state funding to help with the non-federal share, whether it's asking our federal partners to consider reducing the non-federal match because of how important our national assets are here in Hampton Roads, whether it's military, whether it's port, and making certain that the CFPF remains a viable funding source as well. So we're going to be advocating very hard, and we're hopeful for some progress this session.
Schroeder?
If I could, just to follow up with that. The governor's released his budget and budget amendments have been filed. Where are we on that program? I think
there are some budget amendments that do support the CFPF. There are other General Assembly members that had mentioned when budget negotiations begin to happen that perhaps there's another bite out of the apple at that point.
All good questions. Are there any more? Would somebody like to make a motion to approve? Thank you.
Second.
Second.
I apologize, just to review so Kelly can get that. So I believe motion by Mr. Keaton, second by
Mr. Kaplan, I believe.
yes, Mayor Kaplan. Okay, thank you. I apologize, sir.
No worries. Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next on the agenda is our Hampton Roads 2025 economic forecast. We're going to invite Ms. Johnson to come forward.
So Nikki Johnson is your regional economist at the HRPDC. Since 1990, the HRPDC has prepared economic forecasts for the Hampton Roads region, and we're pleased to bring Nikki to the podium to share her outlook with you today. Thanks, Nikki.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Nikki Johnson, regional economist here at the PDC. And I'm here today to provide an overview of the latest trends that we've seen in the economy over the last year and discuss prospects for future growth for 2025. So, starting with the national economy, it's continued to show incredible resilience over the last few years. That cannot be understated enough. If we think back to just 2 years ago, a majority of economists were predicting a recession for 2023. Yet in 2023, not only did we not see a recession, on an inflation adjusted GDP quarterly on an annualized basis outpaced the average for the previous decade. So we're still well above those pre-pandemic trends. So far over the past year, we have seen a slight slowdown in inflation adjusted GDP. However, we're still right around or above the average growth of the previous decade. And so what this is signaling is a normalization to pre-pandemic trends rather than an impending downturn. Now, inflation has moderated significantly over the past few years. If we think back just to 2022, prices were up 8% year over year. That was the highest rate in decades. And we really did make initially strong progress. So by 2023, we're already at 3 to 4% inflation rate. However, over the past year, we have seen that stall, and inflation has remained a little bit more stubborn. The latest estimates that were released this week for December show a slight uptick in inflation. So we're now around 2.9%. We're back up to nearly 3%. The drive in that uptick for the latest month was mostly due to food and energy, which is why the core inflation number that you see there is a little bit more stable. But overall, what we're seeing is we still have a little bit of ways to go until we get to that target 2% rate. And so it is going to take some time. But we do see some positives. And if we were to compare monthly inflation to wage gains have outpaced inflation on the national level for the last year and a half. And that has been a really big boost to consumer spending. And that consumer spending has really driven that remarkable resilience in the national economy that we've seen over the last few years. And if we look at retail sales here in the region, year to date through October, retail sales in Hampton Roads are up year over year. And so we're still seeing that strong growth. Consumers are being a little bit more selective in their buying as inflation remains somewhat elevated, but we're still seeing strong growth. Now, job growth over the last year has also slowed. So this is the national level. We see monthly job gains as of December for the latest month is 170,000, slightly below the previous year of 212,000. But if you compare it to the line that you see there of the average monthly job gains in 2019, still either above or right at the 2019 levels. So just as we saw with economic activity, this is signaling more of a slowdown to pre-pandemic trends rather than an impending downturn. In Hampton Roads, we see a similar trend. The region recovered all the jobs lost during the pandemic in 2023, early 2023, and we are seeing a continued slowdown over the past year. But if you were to compare the growth rate over the past year to pre-pandemic growth rates, still well above that average. And so if we compare job growth in the region to the US, we know prior to the pandemic, the region tended to lag the national average in job growth. Now, some of that was due to the federal budget sequestration in 2013, which slowed the recovery from the Great Recession here in Hampton Roads relative to other areas. We know that even in the immediate aftermath of the pandemic, job growth was slower in the region. It took us an extra 6 months to reach a full recovery relative to the nation. But what we've seen over the past year is that job growth in the nation has decelerated at a faster rate. And so as you see for the latest month for November, year over year, jobs in Hampton Roads were up 1.7%. It's a little bit higher than the 1.4% national average. Labor force and employment also made a full recovery in 2023, this is civilian labor force and individuals employed, but we are seeing a similar slowdown. So if you look, I'm gonna try to use this. You can see that we get flatter here towards the end as growth has slowed over the past year. That's reflecting this general cooling of labor market conditions. We know that on a national level, in this elevated interest rate environment, firms seem to be a little bit more hesitant when it comes to hiring and expansions, but they are cautious when it comes to firing. So they've been more hesitant. And so what we see nationally is that hiring has actually fallen to near decade lows over the past year, but layoffs have remained relatively stable. And so we've seen a slight uptick in the unemployment rate, but not much. So nationally, we've seen that rise a little bit faster than in the region. Hampton Roads has remained below the national average, and this was true even prior to the pandemic. But both for the region and the nation, we're right around those pre-pandemic levels, despite this latest uptick. If we look at the main contributors of job growth over the last year, the largest gains were in construction, followed by business services. Government saw large gains in job growth, both in the region, is what you see here, and nationally. But if we were to compare to 2019 levels, we still have not seen a full recovery in government jobs. Leisure and hospitality, though, did make a full recovery in 2023, and they are up year over year. However, we are seeing a slowdown in the tourism industry in general. If we look at hotel revenues in the region over the past year, we are seeing a decline. And we think that this is somewhat related to this bifurcation that we're seeing in the hotel performance market. So in the initial aftermath of the pandemic, Hampton Roads actually benefited more than other areas from the revenge spending that we saw. As soon as things opened up, everybody wanted to travel. And so we actually benefited from a lot of drive-in leisure travel. And so in Hampton Roads, hotel revenues were growing faster than the state. But since then, we have seen a faster decline. So this bifurcation, which is telling us essentially that with higher inflation, lower income, middle income households have slowed in their demand for travel, while the upscale and luxury market is still showing stronger growth. And so we can see that an area like Virginia and Northern Virginia, which is a little bit more dependent on business travelers, they were a lot slower to recover from the pandemic, but now they're seeing a little bit more stable growth. But Hampton Roads, which was faster to recover, is now seeing a greater deceleration over the last year. So the sticky inflation prices are hurting demand for travel among low income and middle income households. Turning to defense, we see that defense spending in Hampton Roads increased to $14.6 billion in 2024. So that is the third straight year of rising defense spending in the region. We also outpaced our 2019 levels, which is positive. If we think to the National Defense Authorization Act, for next year, we also see military pay raises are expected, which will help boost the economy. I would usually follow this graph with military employment, which is something that we would commonly talk about here in the region. But the Bureau of Economic Analysis, which was the only public source of that data, discontinued those tables last year due to budget cuts. This has really affected our region more than other areas because this is such a large portion of our workforce. So we are currently working to try to get those back, but any advocacy you can provide in that would be very helpful. The port continued to show robust performance despite the strikes and slower global growth rates in terms of economic activity. We know that on a fiscal year basis, both revenues and containers were up year over year. Excuse me. And so we continue to expect strong growth within 2025, but of course, there's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to labor negotiations and then also global trade policies moving forward. Turning to the housing market, We know that home sales have declined significantly from that initial surge in 2021, 2022. However, over the past year, the decline has been at a slower pace relative to 2023. You see that for latest month in October, home sales were about 2,129, which is slightly above the previous year, but we are still near decade lows. And we know that the main driver of that slower growth in home sales is due to that historic rise in mortgage rates that we've seen. Now, mortgage rates peaked in 2023, about 7.6%. But as you can see, the decline compared to that initial increase in 2022 is not going to be the same. I would not expect 2% mortgage rates anytime soon. We also know that the Fed has been more cautious. We're in a higher for longer interest rate environment. While we do expect more Fed rate cuts, it will take some time to get mortgage rates back down. Now, while home prices have slowed significantly, we know that not home prices, home sales have slowed significantly. Inventories have yet to reach their pre-pandemic levels. So this is the month's supply of existing homes, which is saying that at the current pace of sales, how long would it take you to sell off your entire inventory of homes for sale, right? During the pandemic, when we had that surge in home sales, the month supply of inventory was 1 month, which is a historic low. But that return to pre-pandemic levels has been really slow. As of October, we're still at 2.2 months. And so what does it mean when supply remains low, but demand also has gone down? Well, we see that home values have remained stubbornly high. And so in Hampton Roads, if we compare the typical home value in January 2020 to the latest month for November of last year, they're up 48%. Now that is slightly lower than the nation, which is at 53.1%. But overall, over the last year, we have seen some slowdown in growth, but we're still not at the levels that we need to be. Also, if you think about inflation, more than 40% of the inflation measure, that top line number that you hear in the news all the time, is housing costs, right? Because that is the largest single payment that all households make. And so with housing costs still elevated high, it's made inflation harder to tackle over time. So Hampton Roads typically does see a slower growth in home values relative to the nation. That was also true in the decade prior to the pandemic. But we have seen faster rents. And so if we look at rent prices, over the past year, rents have accelerated faster here in the region than they have in the nation. You can just see in the past year, we've gone up about 7 percentage points between, so that's November 2024 to November 2023. Compare that to the US, which is about 4 percentage points. And we know that with the current housing market environment, low inventories, low demand, right, high prices, this has exacerbated that housing affordability crisis. We know that the number of cost burden households in Hampton Roads in 2023 increased. It also increased nationally. And the largest driver of that increase, when I say cost burden, I'm talking about households who are spending 30% or more of their income on housing. So the percentage of households spending more than 30% has increased. The largest driver of that have been renters. So rental prices have continued to be an issue moving forward. But overall, I would say the fundamentals of the economy remain strong. But what we are seeing is an expected moderation to continue into 2025. We expect GDP growth to remain strong, but moderate from the previous year, both regionally and in the nation. Defense spending, as we see, continues to report strong growth. We know that the military pay increases will help boost the regional economy here. Inflation, we have yet to move towards that 2% target. It's looking like it might take a little bit longer, given the latest estimates, a little bit stickier than we expected, but we are still doing a gradual movement towards that. We are expecting some Fed rate cuts. Question is how many in 2025? But we expect that to help ease mortgage rates and boost home sales moving forward. But all of this means nothing if we don't really understand the level of uncertainty that we have moving forward with the upcoming administration, what the policy direction is going to be, We have a lot of geopolitical risks moving forward. So there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding our forecast. Like I said, the fundamentals remain strong. However, we are expecting slower growth in the next year. And so this is our forecast for 2025. You can see we expect real GDP, both nationally and the region, slowed around 2.1%. Job growth, we expect to still slow, but below the 2023 actual, but still, as I'm saying, above those 2019 levels. We've just been at an accelerated pace in that initial aftermath of the pandemic, and we're just moving down to that gradual normal level. We also expect retail sales to slow moving forward, but a lot of uncertainty ahead. Any questions?
Thank you, Nikki. So I have a question. You had talked about prices of houses and rents over the last 4 years have gone up 48.4% and 38.9% respectively. Anything in your research give you any indication what the next 4 years will hold, and how does that compare to the previous 4 years?
So I would say previous 4 years is a little bit hard because that's 2020, 2024. That's when we really saw this spike. It was a lot more moderate growth in the decade prior to the pandemic. I do expect us to get back there. It's just been, the housing market has been a lot slower to return to those normal levels. The higher interest rate environment has not helped that. I do think that we will slowly get back there within the next few years, but it's hard to know, given all of the level of uncertainty, how quickly that will move. I think the region has tended to have faster rents relative to the national average, but I think if you compare us to other major metro areas, we're not necessarily the highest. So it is somewhat of a rural metro. When you look at the national average, you're also taking into account a lot of those rural areas. So that does put us a little bit higher, but overall, I think we will make some improvement over the next year.
Improvements in terms of not growing as fast.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
I don't expect down, just slower growth.
Any other questions? Ms. Ritter?
I have one. I know you base this on federal numbers, correct?
The forecast, yeah.
Okay, so I've never understood, probably never will, why the seemingly biggest drivers of inflation in the public's mind are food and energy. And they're not included. So it's really difficult for someone to say, anyone, you, me, whomever, the economy's in great shape, because that's not what people are seeing. Is there any way at all to evaluate what the energy and food costs are imposing on our citizens and families?
Absolutely. So inflation has been a difficult thing for economists, I think, to explain. I think for the average person, right, when you think of inflation, it's always important to take wage gains into account. Because if my wages are rising faster than prices, right, then overall I'm doing better. But the thing is that when we see wage gains and we think about the wage gains over the last few years, the average American has received a raise. But that the way that we get paid nowadays, it's in your bank account. I know I've received a raise over the last few years. I can't tell you exactly how much, but I can tell you that when I go to the store, I know that that bag of Doritos did not cost $7.99 a year ago, right? And so when you're faced with food prices, it's in your face, you're buying it. And so you're seeing that effect a lot more than you would the increased pay that's in your bank account. And so that has been a lot more difficult for economists to explain that overall we are doing well, even though it's when you go to the grocery store, you might not feel it, right? But you have received a raise. So on average, the average private sector employee has seen faster wage gains over the last year and a half than we've seen inflation rise. Now,
I'm not sure people don't know how much more they make. But that's just a comment. I'm just wondering if there's any way at all to incorporate I know they're pretty volatile, at least energy costs are quite volatile.
exactly. And so that's what you see here. So the light blue line is core inflation. And that's where we are subtracting out the more volatile food and energy prices.
Well, and they're never included.
They are included in the top line number. And so the blue line is everything. The light blue line subtracts out the food and energy. So all items is everything. Core inflation excludes food and energy, those more volatile prices.
I mean, I would be surprised if 0.3% is the difference.
What do you,
So
0.3?
I mean, unless this is a national average number.
This is national. We do not have inflation over time for the region.
We don't.
No.
Are we able to do that?
No, unfortunately, so there's no national indicator that tracks it over time. We do have the Center for Economic Research, C2ER. They do their own measures of cost of living for the region, so we can see how our cost of living compares to the national average, but we don't have any data to look at how prices are changing within the region over time.
It would just be nice to find something that translates to actually improving the confidence of people
Yes.
that aren't economists. So
I totally get, and I think it was the initial shock. That rise from about 2% to 8%, that was a shock that everyone felt. And like I said, because you're not feeling the raise as much as you are feeling the prices in the grocery store, there is a disconnect, even if you are overall doing better. Now, of course, not everyone is doing better, but I mean on average.
Mr. Dyer.
Yeah. As we go into budget season, all of us, I came up with a term, confrontation with reality. And, you know, the fact of the matter is the cost of government with the inflation has gone up significantly. We had a briefing recently where the cost of materials, whether it be asphalt, concrete, you name it, to do projects that we do, from 2018 to now went up 99%. And raising the cost of government. And our $567 million bond referendum for stormwater now costs $1.3 billion. And so here's the dilemma that we have. Our housing, it's not unique to Virginia Beach, obviously, but as our housing prices went up, the values on the house, it's difficult to reduce those to a revenue neutral point, because of what the cost of government is now costing all of us. And, that's a real dilemma that we have. And yeah, Debbie, we are definitely sensitive to people going out and buying things and everything. But, the cost of government is expanded geometrically. And that's why we're having trouble. My God, we're just having a upcoming 2-day thing just on our CIP. How are we going to pay for all this stuff? So, but once again, I think that's a kind of a situation that we all are going to have to confront in the future. Thank you.
Absolutely. Construction costs, especially in the initial, after the pandemic, right? A lot of the inflation growth was just driven by supply and demand factors, right? We could not get supply to meet demand. We saw a shift from services to goods. And so there was a lot of issues in the initial, but local governments working on construction projects saw really big spikes. And how does that affect the budget? And we're still seeing continuing issues in terms of government costs, and how can we address that? It's just going to take some time. Now, are there any things that we can do personally within the region to try to address that? I think so. Probably have a future conversation about that.
Thank you, Mayor Dyer. Any other questions? Ms. Johnson, thank you very much. Or Mr. Crum, anything else?
Well, just to say, so Nikki has already been to Virginia Beach, and I know gave a presentation on economic trends as you gear up for your budget process. Mayor Pons, I believe Nikki's going to visit Williamsburg City Council soon.
Yep.
To assist with your process. So please let us know if Nikki can provide you any information. It would be beneficial as you proceed in the budget season. We really want to be able to provide you that assistance. But Nikki, thank you so much for your great work.
Thank you.
Ms. Crum, you want to talk about our legislative agenda?
So what I wanted to do very quickly, because I know many of you have been in meetings for a while today, but I want to give you a little bit of a heads up on some things that are emerging relative to our regional legislative agenda at the General Assembly. There are as many as 30 bills that have been introduced that have some connection to our regional legislative agenda. I'm just going to touch on a very small sampling today, just a few items that I wanted you to be aware of that are emerging for conversation at the General Assembly. So we have talked about the need for increased state funding for planning district commissions repetitively here at the PDC. As you know, we only receive about 190,000 today. If you go back 20 years, we received over $365,000. What that means is it's another unfunded mandate. We are created by the state. When the state does not contribute their share, it puts stresses on our local government partners. I'm very pleased that we do have 2 budget amendments that have been submitted to provide increased funding to this Planning District Commission, HRPDC. Senator Chrissy Newcraig has introduced a budget amendment on the Senate side. Greg Rutendorf had to depart about 15 minutes ago. He is driving up to Richmond for us. The senator is discussing the budget amendment at 4 o'clock today up at the Virginia General Assembly, and Greg will be there as well as a number of our regional partners to lend support for this budget amendment. Delegate Cliff Hayes has introduced a companion on the House side. And that would provide, it would double our funding from the Commonwealth of Virginia, provide another 190,000 of state funding to us, which would be very, very helpful. So good news, but as you know, it's just the start of the process, but I certainly appreciate the senator and the delegate and their support in work on our behalf. We have provided them talking points, and they're really doing a great job of representing us. This next one I was aware of through our State Association of Planning District Commissions, but a bill has been filed, and it's something that I want to bring to everybody's attention because this next bill will impact the PDC, but it's also going to impact local governments. It is House Bill 2126. The patron is from Northern Virginia. HB 2126 deals with energy planning in Virginia. And to achieve the state's green energy goals, it establishes the Virginia Energy Facilities Review Board to provide oversight on how we're doing as a Commonwealth and as regions to address our energy development goals. But I put 3 dots there because it contains a lot of information, but to drive it home to this board, it establishes requirements for planning district commissions to develop regional energy plans and to then do some reporting back to the state to make certain that we are achieving the statewide energy production goals. So at high level, that sounds like a fairly reasonable idea. But but there's a couple of things that cause concerns. Number one, it requires each PDC to adopt a regional energy plan by July 2026, right? That is about 17 and a half months from today. So that is not a long period of time to fund and develop a regional energy plan. While there's money in the bill to provide ironically enough, another 190,000 per PDC in Virginia to do this work, to do all the things the bill requires within that time frame is going to be very difficult. In addition, the energy plans will be required to address energy generation, storage, and use that demonstrates a meaningful contribution to the Commonwealth of Virginia's energy goals. And it also includes provisions that impact your local zoning and permitting for energy facilities. Now, one of the position statements we have in our regional legislative agenda is we want protection of local land use authority, and we work hard to understand everybody's role here, right? The PDC, we're a convener. we develop consensus, but the decision for local land use authority rests with the local governments. And as you all are very, very aware, whether it's a solar farm, whether it's a battery storage facility, the siting of these facilities cause a number of difficult conversations at the local level. And obviously, you all know your communities and what works best within your localities. So this bill starts to put PDCs in a place that we have never been and don't want to be, which is in your local land use. And obviously, that's not a place that we want to go. So I wanted to bring, Mr. Chairman, I want to bring this one to everybody's attention. We'll be working with your legislative liaisons to keep an eye on this. There was a committee that developed this bill, but all the PDCs have weighed in and expressed concerns about this. There's a resource issue, there's a time issue, but the most important issue is our relationship with you as our local government partners. So I wanted to bring HB 2126 and put this on everybody's agenda or list to keep an eye on. Now, another one that I think could be positive for us, in our regional legislative package, we specifically asked for some funding attention for some of our biking and walking trails in Hampton Roads, whether that's Trail 757, whether that's the Dismal Swamp Trail, whether that's the Southampton Roads Trail, the Elizabeth River Trail, Virginia Beach Trail, etc. There is a bill, House Bill 2059, which would create the Virginia Great Outdoors Act, and it would move beginning July 1 of 2026, no less than $200 million of remaining statewide recordation tax revenues, and put them in a fund for land protection and preservation purposes, and then take another 30 million at least and make them available for infrastructure improvements and other capital improvements for state parks. There's also a provision that would take some of this funding and make it available for biking and walking trail funding. So for many of our localities, and you see in our legislative agenda, these trails touch all of our local governments. We want to monitor this, and if money does become available for those biking and walking trails, we want to be certain we're in a position to take advantage of this. I know that some of the local governments are approaching legislators for budget provisions during the budget negotiation process for portions of their trails to receive some funding. And we'll continue to monitor how those requests and items proceed. Okay, there is a bill for the city of Norfolk. I know this is one that you're going to be very watching very closely, but really for the entire region. House Bill 1982, which addresses light rail. So high level, the TIDE, the Virginia Light Rail System, is the only light rail system in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So it's probably not a surprise that they don't have a funding program that fits exactly for light rail. Right now, the light rail system, the TIDE, is in a funding program with what we call conventional transit systems. So light rail is in the same funding program as buses, is bus rapid transit, and other conventional transit systems. This bill, HB 1982, would take the TIDE light rail system and place it in the Commonwealth Mass Transit Fund. It would place it in the same fund that funds WMATA and the Metro in Northern Virginia, right? So it would be competing for money with another system that is more like our TIDE light rail system. You're probably aware, if you look back now, the TIDE is about 12 to 13 years old. Its components are beginning to age and need some replacement and maintenance. I know our commission member from Norfolk would know, but the cost to do that can be over $40 million to $50 million, and is a significant investment. And this movement that I know HRT is up in the General Assembly really advocating for would be incredibly helpful to those maintenance and repair costs. So wanted to bring that one to your attention.
Bob,
Yes.
if I may, on this point right here, I was up in Richmond this morning, and William did bring this up at the Hampton Roads Caucus. And so all of the Hampton Roads delegates asked that this bill be sent to them so they all can sign off on it and co-chair and do this as a group for the region, since all of Northern Virginia would be pushing against this. They want to come to GRU as a concerted group.
Thank you for that update. That's very, very helpful. Okay. Transportation funding. I'll be brief on this because we just discussed this at the GPO board meeting today, but for other PDC members that weren't there. House Bill 2466 has been introduced by Delegate Jackie Glass from Norfolk. HB 2466 would take our current regional sales and use tax, which stands at 7/10 of a penny, and would increase it from 7/10 of a penny to a full penny. So it would be a 3/10 of a penny increase. And those monies would be put into a new fund that would fund primary and secondary roads that connect to our interstate system. As you're probably aware, our regional sales and use tax and regional gas tax is currently being used to finance and fund almost $6 billion of interstate highway improvements in Hampton Roads. There are no federal monies in any of those projects. There's loan money, but no grant money. So we are paying our own way. Your residents, with the exclusion of Surrey and the exclusion of Gloucester, all the other localities, residents are paying extra taxes to finance and pay for these interstate highways. This new fund, now that we're getting all the interstate highways improved, we still have a lot of needs. In Virginia Beach, that's Independence Boulevard and other areas. In other localities, it could be Route 17 or Route 13, certainly Route 58. I was talking to the mayor of Franklin about Route 58, certainly up on the peninsula, whether it be the James River Bridge or it be 17 on the peninsula or even Jefferson Boulevard. Right now, there's not a dedicated funding source for those projects. So this bill increases that sales and use tax again from 7/10 of a penny to a full penny. It would generate about $84 million a year that HR TAC could finance and support some of these transportation improvements. Now, the bill divides that additional money up into two sections. 2/3 of that additional $84 million would support improvements to new or existing highways that connect to, surround, or parallel interstate highways. And 1/3 of the money in the bill as written would support transportation infrastructure that is at risk due to recurrent and coastal flooding. So roads like Hampton Boulevard or Shore Drive that flood on a fairly regular basis would be eligible for improvements through this program. Earlier today, the HRTPO board passed a resolution in support, and you will see that it also was approved as part of our regional legislative agenda last month. But I did want to bring this bill to the attention of the HRPDC. And then, Mr. Chairman, obviously we could go through a whole list of bills. I just want to touch on some of these highlights, but I would like to, with the help of John Sadler, our Principal Emergency Management Coordinator, and ask John to join me at the podium. I would like to touch on an emerging legislative issue, and that deals with emergency sheltering capacity and evacuation enhancements in Hampton Roads. Before John talks about this, I think you all know, we've been incredibly fortunate that we've not seen that enormous large storm, right? But if we were to, being certain that we're prepared, not only with evacuation plans, but with the appropriate sheltering is going to be critical. John is your emergency management planner who coordinates efforts with all of your local emergency management professionals. And John, I think you have some feedback from them today in terms of perhaps a path forward for us.
Good afternoon. So as you all know, we just came through a very difficult hurricane season. And a lot of you and people in your localities came to us and started asking a few questions about what are we doing for hurricane preparedness on a regional level. And traditionally, this has been primarily led by your localities and the state. But we've been asked to get involved. And one of the ways that we can help is to take some of our requests and kind of get behind a regional addition to the legislative package. Obviously, we're a little late, but what we were looking at was, as Bob said, to increase sheltering capacity. The big driver behind a lot of these is a VDM study, which showed that as a region, we are a deficit in our sheltering capabilities. Now, it's going to vary locality to locality, but as I said, as a region, we're short. So we were asking for some funding to help you build more shelters, to help augment pre-existing structures, to make them shelters. As you heard Ben say, it's flooding in more places. So some of your shelters that were your go-to may not be your go-to anymore. We're also asking for some financial independence from VDM. Much like our regional efforts here, VDM's efforts are primarily, I would say primarily, but a substantially large portion of VDM is driven by grant funding. Not only do those grants have requirements, but they also have restrictions as to what they can and can't work on. So we would ask that the region support VDM's request, which is in the governor's budget, to help get them off of grants, which would allow them to help us address this problem as well. And lastly, we're asking for the state to help identify with staffing. One of the biggest shortcomings in terms of operating a shelter is that staffing. So we need the help from the state to essentially establish a pipeline to get the qualified, trained personnel from around the state to help us in the event of an emergency. Any questions on those items? Thank you.
John, if I may, so as John said, we realized that for this session, that this could be difficult, but what we would like to recommend on this particular item, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Bunning is the chair of our CAO committee. Mr. Price is the vice chair. We will have a meeting the first Wednesday of February. I think on this one, what John and I would like to do is go to our CAOs, talk to them about strategy and tactics in terms of how we can, first off, socialize these ideas with them. As John said, he has from the emergency management professionals some recommendations, and then we can make a determination on how we move forward and could report back to you next month on that. Okay. Thanks, John. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our comments for today.
Okay. So there obviously a lot going on in the General Assembly, a lot of bills going forward, and now additionally with this suggestion about the shelters and the need for shelters moving forward. Are there any questions or thoughts?
I got one.
Yes, sir. Mr. Hipple.
The one bill, I think it was energy. Yeah, as far as localities, getting into our business on our land and what we do, we'd rather not. And we'd rather control what our jurisdictions look like and how we form what we need and what fits best. And, we've got solar policies put out there and everything else that James City County runs with. And some of them are, if we've got certain lands that are farmlands that we want to preserve as a farmland and not put solar on it. And some of the amount of clearing and trees that we take down, and those sort of things. So I think for this group to work well, I know you're being pushed to try to put something together, but we have enough trouble with the state telling us what we can and can't do with our jurisdictions and how we like to be. The same thing going into Williamsburg and saying right in the middle of Colonial Williamsburg on the side of Duke Law Street, you need to put solar panels. Well, that wouldn't work at all. I mean, and so each jurisdiction is different, and some may be able to put more, some may be able to put less. So that's something that we'll have to be very cautious with as they come out with that.
So, and I think, yes, sir, Mr. Hipple, and I think that's why you're seeing all the PDCs in unison saying, look, the idea of energy planning is a good one, but not crossing over into local permitting and local decision-making. And if I may, sir, I think the push is coming, and this is always difficult, right? But there are those pushing at the state level that believe that local permitting slows down the process. And obviously, there's always two sides to that story, right? And I don't think the way to do that is getting regional involvement, right? So I think we completely agree.
And I would agree to that to a certain point, if you want to go ahead and concrete the whole damn place over and put whatever you want, you know, but there's a balance, and people come to each one of our communities because it's been enhanced by something that draws them in. And I don't think it's a concrete jungle. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why we thought it was important to bring this to your attention and get it on your radar, because we want to be certain that everybody is understands this bill. Thank you.
And I would agree, you know, land use decisions are best met by local jurisdictions, because what's good in one community is not good, may not be good in another. And so a blanketed, you know, short-term rental policy from the state doesn't serve any of us well.
No, it doesn't serve at all.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Crum.
We will be up at the caucus next Thursday morning to be having a discussion with them. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. You want to go ahead and run through the rest of the agenda of the meetings?
Yes, sir. Our next meeting will be scheduled for February the 20th. You can see our planned agenda items for that meeting. Advisory committee minutes are included for your review, as well as the technical committees and a few items for your information. But our next meeting is scheduled for February the 20th, and then we will take off the month of March.
Any other old business, new business? Seeing none, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
No new good businesses.